I have with me today Detective Mike Proctor, who has been impaneled as a stalking expert in the National Stalking Training Academy in the UK, developed by the Home Office, and is one of the expert advisors for Action Against Stalking in Scotland, and assisted back in 2011-2012 in developing the UK's stalking legislation. He is the author of the book Antidote for a Stalker, which is available on Amazon. He has a BA with minors from Cal State University, Long Beach, a secondary and community college teaching credential, as well as a Texas Commission on Law Enforcement credential. He is a retired homicide detective with over 33 years in law enforcement in the Orange County area of California. During that time, he was Officer of the Year and Detective of the Year 3 years in a row. He began working stalkers in 1991 and is considered a pioneer in the investigation of stalking and threat assessment thereof. He wrote the first article concerning stalking for the California Journal of Law Enforcement, Stalking, a Behavioral Overview with Case Management Suggestions, then became one of the Post Peace Officer Standard and Training Commissioners on the first comprehensive training video and workbook on stalking in 1996. He received numerous awards for his work in stalking, including the Defender of Justice Award. Over the years, he has assisted countries and states in developing and modifying their stalking legislation. Detective Proctor is currently a consultant for OVC, which is the Office for Victims of Crime, was spotlighted by OVC for continued work in the field of stalking, and in 2016 was contracted by them to review and update their Victim Advocate Training module on stalking. He was one of the consultants on a DOJ Violence Against Women grant entitled the USC College Consortium Project, which was designed to assist colleges and universities in better handling the ever-increasing issue of campus stalking. He continues to write articles and books on the subject of stalking, including his book Antidote for a Stalker, which is available on Amazon. He regularly both consults and trains victim advocate groups, law enforcement, healthcare professionals, as well as educators concerning the issues of stalking. He also conducts seminars for organizations such as the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence Conference. He consults for print, radio, internet, and television on a regular basis and has appeared on numerous television shows and productions such as 2020, America's Most Wanted, CNN, Fox, Case Closed, Reels TV, and Oxygen. His written blog, Stalking Detectives First Aid for Victims, is available online. He regularly assists law enforcement concerning ongoing cases. One of his latest was a celebrity stalking in California Bay Area. Over the years, he has continually tweaked a stalking investigative protocol that is utilized all or in full by law enforcement agencies in the US and abroad. Lastly, he recently completed an online training for West London University's Criminal Justice Department. I hope I got all that okay. And thank you.
That's fine. Yeah, you're doing good.
Thank you so much for joining me today, Detective Proctor. I'm so excited.
Well, glad to be here. Like I said, anytime I can help people with stalking issues, I'm more than happy to assist.
I'm really grateful to talk to you on this issue. As I've mentioned, it's a fascination of mine, and I couldn't think of anyone better to talk to about this. So thank you. Okay,
great. Yeah. I just got finished with another training over in the UK, which with the Scotland Association there. They did an overall international training. So that went out, and that worked out well for everybody that was involved in it. So you should keep an eye on that group. They do a pretty good job over there.
What are they called?
It's called the Action Against Stalking. Sorry about that.
No problem.
That's also out of Scotland. Let me unplug this thing. I forgot about it.
No problem.
Okay, second. Sorry, I forgot about it.
No problem whatsoever.
Okay. So basically, that's a very good organization. Of course, you know that stalking has been a stalking law in the United States. It started in California since June of 91 or January of 1991. And I had my first stalking case in June of 1991 when I was still working homicide. I had 20 years in law enforcement at that particular time already. So, and we didn't know anything about stalking. It was a brand new law. So it came to the homicide team, and the homicide team worked it. We had probably one of the first cases ever, if it was in California, then it was in the world. And it took us 3 months to get it filed because no one knew how to prosecute a stalking case either. But once it got prosecuted and was in the news, it went off like Donkey Kong. We were teaching all over the place. We were writing articles, we were training, and we're on radio and television all the time because no one knew anything about stalking and they wanted to know more about it, just like you did.
Okay, so that's very interesting then. So I guess that's a two-part question. What exactly is stalking? And is that was 1991 the first time it was ever considered a crime?
Well, it got produced in 1990, and most people think that stalking came to fruition as a law in California because of the celebrities that were being stalked. And yes, they help, but that's not why the law was written. The law was actually written by Orange County municipal court judge by the name of Watson, and also a senator at Fullerton in Orange County at that time, because law enforcement was coming to them and saying, look, we're getting these women killed after these guys are following them and this, that, and the other thing, and we're only able to produce misdemeanor crimes against them. We need something that we can do. So they formulated the stalking law, the legislation, because 5 women in Orange County were killed by their significant others within a short period of time. That's why the law came to fruition. So the stalking law in your country is 264 of your criminal code. The stalking law in California, which most stalking laws in the United States basically are monitored after or developed after, they do is called 646.9 of the California Penal Code. And I'm looking it up here. Any person who willfully, maliciously, and repeatedly follows or willfully and maliciously harasses another person and who makes a credible threat with the intent to place that person in reasonable fear for his or her safety or his or her immediate family is guilty of the crime and stalking. And in California, it's a wobbler, so it can be either a misdemeanor or felony, but it allows law enforcement to charge and make arrests without it being a misdemeanor. It'd be a felony arrest, and if they decide later to reduce it to a misdemeanor, they can. If you do your stalking investigation correctly, and our average stalking crime report was between 100 and 150 pages long, what we did, you get felony convictions. We only had one stalker ever go to trial. Keep that in mind. Out of the stalkers we worked, once we started working them, we wrote the protocol, we only had one stalker go to trial. And that was because he had severe OCD, and he would stalk before. He went after a woman in another city. She was in her 80s and she lived in a mobile home, and he wanted to have sex with her. And he was in his late 20s, and she refused. And when she refused, he tried to burn her house down with her in it. Now, stalkers can be violent, but not all stalkers are violent. So we had worked him on another case, and he decided he didn't want to go to jail for a prolonged period of time. The judge offered him 9 years. Because he went to trial, the judge gave him 19.
Wow. Wow. Okay, so you say that they don't always get violent. Do stalkers, can you have a stalker who stalks but does not make threats?
Right. Remember, stalking is basically a course of conduct crime.
Right.
So it's the behavior of the stalker that causes the victim to have severe emotional distress or fear. It doesn't have to be a direct threat. It's called a credible threat. So it's the compilation of all the behavior combined that leads to the, not a direct threat, but a credible threat. So a credible threat would be, I'm going to kill you.
Right.
A direct threat would be, I'm going to kill you. But a credible threat, again, is the compilation of all the behavior, unusual behavior. So the common man situation, you bring this to an individual and you say, this guy's doing this, 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 and this, would that cause you severe emotional distress and fear? Most people say, oh, absolutely. Well, that's a credible threat. Does that help?
Absolutely. And is this something that, like you said, a course of conduct? So is this behavior, this is sort of two questions in one, is this behavior that has gone on for a long period of time and continues to persist with the stalker, as opposed to, say, you breaking up with a girlfriend and she blows up your phone for 2 days wanting to get back together? Like, it's a long history of this type of behavior?
Yeah, I understand your question. The situation is that, let me first lay out that the vast majority of stalking, 80 to 85% of stalking is domestic violence or intimate partner.
Okay.
And so then you have stranger stalkers and other types of stalkers. There's a variety of different types of stalkers. And we always tell the investigators that they need to understand, you need to know what kind of stalker you're dealing with and their mental proclivities and things of that nature before you can really do a positive investigation on stalking. But the thing is, my first stalking case that I was discussing, I'm not talking about the guy that tried to kill the lady in her mobile home. The first stalking case that we had in my city ended up going 19 years. All right. So, and I arrested the guy 3 times. He's profiled in America's Most Wanted. And I eventually went back to another state. They flew me back in 2001 to testify in his penalty session for a murder that he had committed back in that state. But over the course of that 19 years, he stalked multiple victims. Now, keep in mind, I've never had a stalker that stalked more than one person at a time, but I have had stalkers that stalked multiple victims over a period of time. So to answer your question, yes, the average stalking case, if law enforcement doesn't jump it, it can go for a minimum of 2 years, and it can last for a lot longer than that. Obviously, 19 years is somewhat unusual, but it does. I've had several cases I've consulted on or investigated that last numerous years. So, and there's another thing you should be aware of. With victims, especially female victims, male victims will develop what we call a genesis victim. Now, what that is they'll start stalking a specific female, and then there's an intervention either by law enforcement or for some other reason. He gets sick or he goes someplace else and he comes back, but he may then stalk someone else, all right? But if there's an intervention on that stalking, then he comes back to his first victim or his primary victim, which we consider a genesis victim. That's where we've coined the situation. And we always look for those victims when we investigate. Even though they don't like us to find them, we find them, and then we can bring them in to testify in the other guy's case because we can use previous bad acts. So, and oftentimes we'll find other stalking victims when we do that. So our interview with the primary victim, we find out about these other women this individual stalked. Now, we do have some women that do have a genesis victim, but they're usually LBGQ. They're, gay or lesbian. So, okay.
Okay. And in your experience with most stalkers, is it when they get a restraining order or the police tell this individual to stay away from the victim, is it more times than not that the nature of whatever makes them stalk? Like, do most stop at that point of police intervention and say, okay, now I'm in trouble, I got to leave this alone, this is causing me problems to my life, I'm not going to continue to stalk people?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
So
okay.
A restraining order is only as good as the people backing it. So our previous conversation, I explained that I came from a threat assessment team, which is known as the Family Protection Unit, where we had specific detectives assigned and our own district attorney and variety of other people assigned to that unit. And whenever we decided to get a stalking order against the individual, we would serve it. So he saw us, he saw the police, he knew we were coming after him. So that tends to slow them down a little bit, but I will tell you that most stalkers, when they go after a specific target, are so obsessed, they don't care. All right. Now, some of them, we've given them restraining orders and they backed off, but the vast majority don't. Oftentimes, we wouldn't get restraining orders against stalkers. We'd wait till we arrested them and then have the judge give them a criminal stay away order as part of the sentencing, because that had a little more teeth than what a civil restraining order did. But the civil restraining order allows law enforcement to come in and do their job as well. And in California and other states, a patrol officer or patrol deputy, a uniformed officer, can go out to a scene, figure out he has stalking, and then he can get a temporary restraining order issued immediately at that time. Now, some other states don't do that, and some other countries don't do that. They're moving towards that, hopefully. The UK is, and things like that. So.
Okay, and you mentioned the obsession with the target, and without going into it, that has been my experience, is that there is this fixation and this obsession. So if this has been going on and this person, say, this stalker has some type of personality disorder that makes them do this, like narcissistic personality disorder, antisocial personality disorder, and they have a history of this type of behavior, does it seem, at least in Canada, do you think that it seems to be so difficult to prosecute this, if that is the nature of their disorder or their issue?
Well, just let me give you some basis here. Now we'll get into narcissistic personality disorder. We have a lot of stalkers that exhibit that. Keep in mind that not all stalkers have a mental disorder. Many do. Celebrity stalkers in general do. And they feel that their victims, they've had some kind of relationship with them, have children, or they're married to them, or whatever else. But those particular stalkers tend to script their stalking. And the vast majority of other stalkers do not necessarily script it, and they're not delusional. Now, those folks that I just got finished talking about, in general, are delusional. Most stalkers are not delusional at all. They know exactly what they're doing. Even if they've got a personality disorder, it doesn't stop, that doesn't make them delusional, okay? So the reason that most stalking, when they go to trial, they don't try and get away from the crime by claiming to have a mental disorder, or because why? Why do you think that is?
I'm not really sure, actually.
Okay. Well, the reason is because when they stalk, they exhibit planning.
Yeah. And
that shows conscious effort to continue on with the stalking. So that goes out the window in most courts. The judge goes, nah, it's not going to work, So, right. And what's nice about, and getting back to trials and things of that nature, what's nice about having a team, or actually if an investigator actually works as stalker, what he does is he can very often eliminate further violence that can manifest. Now, I'm going to tell you that all stalkers, whether they threaten or not, make threats or not, if you put them in a corner or certain circumstances, they can become violent, all right? But when you work them and put them down, so to speak, in custody, then you stop the homicides. We had a lot of murders generated by stalkers, all right, until we started figuring out what the heck stalking was, and then we could go after the stalker prior to the act of the homicide transpiring. But again, you still have to know what kind of stalker you're dealing with. So yeah, we do have paranoid delusional stalkers. We've got narcissistic personality disorders, antisocial personality disorders. Now, antisocial personality disorders, they don't care about anything. That's simple as that. Now, antisocial gets often labeled as being a psychopath. There's similarities, but they're not all necessarily the same. The other thing is that we also get histrionic personality disorders. So the officer he doesn't have to be a psychologist. Now, even though on our team, we had a psychologist that would respond with us, and we'd run all of our cases by them to see what they thought. We we're already well trained in that stuff, but we went past him or her, whoever was assigned to us by the county at that time, plus a social worker, and they could explain those things to us. So the thing is, just because you have a disorder doesn't mean you can't be a stalker, and it doesn't mean you can't get prosecuted. So we do have a large majority of stalkers that have personality disorders. All right, and you need to know what kind of personality disorder you're dealing with to better work the case. Because there's times when we would get cases, we have the victim come in, and when the victim comes to us, we'd photograph and fingerprint the victim. We'd photograph all their children, any car they drove. And we also, if we felt after our threat assessment evaluation, that was our first interview, if in fact there was a threat, a violent threat potential, we call it lethality factor. If there was a lethality factor to that particular victim, then we would send our crime scene people out to her apartment, her house, wherever she lived. They would photograph the interior of the house. They would draw a diagram of the house, and they would come back to us with all that information. Why do you think we did that?
I'm not sure. I would love to know though.
Okay.
Yes, please.
If I, my partner, or any other detectives, or a Metro team, that's, they're all co-trained as SWAT, or a SWAT team, had to go in that house because we felt there was a threat to the woman and the suspect was there, we want to know exactly what it looked like when we went in there for everyone's safety, including theirs. We didn't want any surprises. So that's why we did that. And I will guarantee you that every woman that we ever had in there as a victim loved what we did because we were showing them the attention that they needed. Unfortunately, most stalking victims have to become their own advocate, and I don't like that. We work for the victim. We would get cases come to our department from other agencies that, even though we're training them, they just didn't really want to work the case, or they didn't understand how to work the case, and they would ask us to work it. And fortunately, our agency was open enough where we'd work the case, no matter if it was in LA County or our agency or whatever. Now, keep in mind that Los Angeles Police Department has a very good threat management team, but they're much larger than most agencies, and so they can afford to do that. So
interesting. Interesting. I heard you say in an interview that I watched with Dr. Carlos Vasquez, I believe his name was, a few years ago that you did. And I heard you mention that stalkers often work in, they're very smart, but they often work in jobs that are not up to their potential so that they have lots of extra time to stalk people. Have you also found though that these people can come in all jobs? Like, do you ever find cops who stalk, or doctors and lawyers who stalk? What kinds of people stalk?
no, that's a very good question, because we get that from all genres. We get stalking from all genres. We get stalking from politicians. We get stalking from judges. We get stalking from cops, unfortunately.
Wow.
I've had to arrest a couple of those. And we get stalking from medical people and things of that nature. Keep in mind too, one of the greatest areas of stalking in the United States is, and probably elsewhere too, is what? Your mental health workers get stalked a lot. In fact, I deal with them on a fairly regular basis because what? They show compassion to their clients, and they're trying to help them. And those people attach to the psychologists and psychiatrists and things of that nature. And the same thing occurs for nurses and doctors. Whenever they're showing attention, then these people attach. You'd be surprised how easy it is for a stalker to attach to somebody that has no idea that they're even having a problem or an issue with this individual. So we had a guy that would go into a supermarket, and he would go to one specific cashier, and that's how he was stalking her. And then he started ending up in the break room and things of that nature. In fact, there was the first civil lawsuit ever in the history of the United States was filed on that particular case, and I wrote the brief, one of the briefs on it. So that was back in 1996. But the thing is that you just don't know when it's going to happen. You could be walking through a store, it could be a fellow employee, and that's why it's so important for businesses to have what we call WVTs, workplace violence teams. So, and be trained in stalking and other threats and that type of thing. Now, every place you work, pretty much, probably even in Canada, they talk about sexual harassment.
Yeah.
But I guarantee you, they probably don't have a threat management team or somebody that talks to you about stalking or harassment of a fellow employee and things of that nature. They're getting better, but they're not there yet.
I haven't heard of anything like that. Just most employers seem to have policies in regards to sexual harassment, workplace
Absolutely.
harassment, but not specifically stalking. Is there red flags? Is there red flags of escalating behavior? Like, say, they'll ask you out on a date and you decline that, so the next thing they're contacting your job looking to book services with you. Like, are there red flags of this behavior or not always?
Well, here's what happens whenever I lecture, I teach. One of the first questions I get from people in the audience is, well, how do you tell when you're being stalked? Well, when the person's behavior is continuous and it makes you feel uncomfortable, in physical distress or fear, you're being stalked. That's very uncomfortable environments. So yeah, exactly. If somebody asks you out and then all of a sudden they start showing up at your door, or they contact your business to find out more information, or any of your potential friends and things of that nature, sure, that's stalking, and that's how it starts. You need to be aware of it. Unfortunately, oftentimes victims are kind of, lack of a better term, clueless. They, especially women, this is in college environments and campus stalking, which is huge, by the way, throughout the world, is their peer groups tell them, oh, don't worry about him. He's just, he's trying to get a date. He'll be fine. Just, shine it. And unfortunately, that doesn't happen. And then further damage transpires with that. So yeah, it's a continual thing. You'll start to see it. Sometimes it starts out as gifts, email contact, if they have your email, telephone, et cetera, on and on. That's what we always tell victims to come to our station with all the things the stalker has left with them, gifts or otherwise. And then we go through all that information with them. Unfortunately, here's what we also get. We get victims that would come to us that have gone to other law enforcement agencies and they haven't been dealt with. That's not what we're here for. Again, we work for the victims, so we try and help them as best we can. And I'm guaranteed it eliminates a lot of problems.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. Something I really was interested in talking with you about as well, because I have heard you talk about this, are so this is a bit of a two-part question. Methods. So what type of methods do they use to gain? I mean, can they break into victims' phones, emails? We talked before recording about drones. What type of do they put GPSs on people's cars? Like, what are the most common types of surveillance methods that you might see these people use?
Well, I've seen all the things you just talked about.
Okay.
But the common surveillance is the following and harassment that way. But unfortunately, the internet is a two-edged sword. It can be a wonderful place to gather knowledge for good and a terrible place to gather knowledge for bad. And yes, you can get GPS contactors that attach to your car. Just go online, take a look, and they'll give you a program that tells you how to monitor those. And that's stemmed usually from the trucking industry and things of that nature, so that they can follow their trucks and see where they were and what they were doing and that type of thing. Well, that transferred over to, well, I'm going to follow my wife, or I'm going to follow my girlfriend, or I'm going to follow this person. You may not even know you have a tracker on there, but I guarantee you, when you contact the police and you tell them, Johnny ends up every place, he knows exactly where I go all the time. How is he doing that? Well, this is before drones too, but they had GPS taggers that they put on there. And if they get a hold of your phone, they could put GPS, they could go on your phone and put stuff on it. Now, it's my understanding, I'm not an expert on internet at all. It takes me forever to get on and off. I need a kid to get me going. So the thing is, that what they can do now is they can actually hack into your phone just by sending you a Trojan. And they can also send you a thing that anytime you type onto a screen or anything else, you write notes or letters, they can see all your keystrokes.
Wow.
These are all things they can do.
Unbelievable.
And that's why we stress with law enforcement that they have their own forensic computer team that does all their digital analysis. Now, again, you're talking about money. So a lot of places don't have that. In the United States, we have what we call CFLs, and they're computer forensic laboratories, about 15 to 20 of them, and they're run by the FBI. And what you can do, they're regional. So, you have 2 in Texas and 2 or 3 in California and whatever. And you can send all your material and stuff to them and they'll run it for you. Of course, you get in a queue. So, but whenever it comes up, but if it's more serious, like a stalker or homicide, they'll put it at the top of the list and they'll run it for you and give you information. We fortunately had our own forensic team that could do all that for us. But I'm saying, if you don't have that and you're a small agency, it doesn't matter. You can find somebody to do it. Usually DA's office at least have a forensic team. I don't know what you call your prosecutor's office in Canada, but their district attorney's office out here.
It's a crown prosecutor.
Yeah, crown prosecutor, like the UK. Oh,
Yep.
yeah, of course.
Yep. You
Right.
got it.
Yeah. So yeah, and I deal with those people over in the UK as well. So
Interesting. I'm dying to ask you this question. I've heard you talk about this. You've done a couple YouTube videos that I saw from a couple years ago on the channel that you had.
yeah, I've stopped doing that. Yeah, because I was in California at the time, and we moved, and I got busy other stuff. So
that's so funny. Yeah, I noticed you did a few videos, and I watched a couple of them. And one topic that I'm very curious about, and I agree with you that some of the people who discuss this issue may possibly have some other psychiatric issues going on.
sure.
But I've heard I'm sure you've heard of the term gang stalking or group stalking. Now,
Right.
yes, so I completely agree that that's, I think there might be other issues going on with a lot of the people who talk about that. However, is it possible that a stalker can pay or bribe or get other people to kind of do some of the stalking for them?
Oh yeah, we have third-party stalking,
Okay.
and that's what we refer to as third-party stalking, but it's not gang stalking. I'll give you an example of what I get all the time on my website and stuff is 4 airplanes went over today, and I know they're watching me, and they're 30,000 feet high, but I know it. And I went outside, and there was this little girl on a bike, and I'm sure she had a camera. And come on. So this is obviously somebody that's having some issues and they need to see somebody to help them out with that. And I try to explain that to them, but it's hard to do when you're just talking one way on the internet for them. But yeah, we do. I work stalkers where a stalker will pay a PI to follow somebody for them and that type of thing and gather information. And sometimes PIs aren't as reliable as they should, or honest, let's put it that way. So it becomes frustrating that way. They also have had friends that they'll talk them into doing something for them, but it's not a whole family of people or a whole neighborhood that comes down on this person or anything like that. Now, you mentioned drones as we spoke before, but that's a new surveillance tool that I'm sure stalkers have ability to utilize. And it's difficult to watch for those all the time when you're in your backyard, maybe you're laying out at the pool or you have one or sunbathing or whatever else. You're not looking around for a drone. And well, maybe you are now these days. I don't know. I would think that anybody would go, I'm sitting out in a swimsuit on the lake, and if they use a drone on me, it'd probably break the camera. So I don't have to worry about that. So, but yeah, so these are things that everything's new. I just saw a TED Talk, and that kind of frightened me because the TED Talk was the guy that developed the computer generated figures for people that were Israel that had died in the concentration camps, and they had survivors, and they videoed them in such a fashion as they could talk to whoever asked them questions. It looks like an actual human being talking to them, and you couldn't tell the difference. If you didn't know, you wouldn't know the difference. And he's concerned about that as being a new tool. Now, do you think a stalker might be able to use that on you? Yeah, and that's scary. So every time you turn around, there's some new version of this or that, and I don't have the time or the intelligence to figure out all that stuff. And it's that's what puts law enforcement behind the curve. But you still need to be aware that it can happen. Does that help?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, some of these stalkers seem very intelligent when it comes to technology, far more so than I can ever comprehend, actually. Like a lot of them seem really, really up to speed with things like drones and surveillance.
Right. And so the situation is, to add to your statement there, I find that most stalkers are not stupid. I find that most stalkers are quite intelligent. They're either book smart and street smart, or they're street smart, not necessarily book smart. But the first stalker I told you about, he was 6'4", weighed 255 pounds, and he kept himself in very clean shape and everything else. Even though sometimes he lived on the streets, he was always clean and everything packed the way he wants, because he was OCD to start with, among other things. And they, by the way, they can have multiple disorders. They don't have to have just one. But he was extremely violent and did all kinds of things. But he also stalked both straight females and gay men. So it was really an interesting thing. When we're finished working him over the years, because I'd have people call me all the time, and when he was finished, we were finished working him, we had a 800-page crime report on him. So when he killed this guy in Alabama, and he and another guy taped this guy up and stomped him to death, and they fled, one of the stalkers, the primary stalking victim in Alabama, contacted my stalking victim in California, one of the primaries, and then they contacted me, and I was able to contact the Alabama State Police and explain to them, I could tell them exactly where this guy would be within 3 different locations. And they go, how do you know that? Well, I've got an 800-page crime report on him. I know I followed him a profile. Profile is big in when you work stalkers and homicides, and profiled him. So I know most of his actions and where he's going to hang. And sure enough, they didn't believe me at all. I told them, send a photograph to this city and this city, and I guarantee you'll have your people in custody within a short period of time. 3 days later, they found him exactly where I said they would, and they took him into custody. So it's important when you're an investigator that you do your homework, okay? Because these guys will stalk more than one person over a period of time.
Wow, that's so fascinating. I thought that they usually have a certain type of profile. So you mentioned that this guy stalked not only females, but gay males. Do they usually have a profile? Like what does that look like?
He was molested for numerous years when he was a young child. You need to know that he was molested as a young child, all right? We had all that information because we stalked the stalker. We find out as much information about him as we possibly can. And by the way, the females that he stalked were all auburn-haired, green-eyed, well-developed women, attractive. So he had a type, just like a pedophile has a type. He'll only stalk or assault a specific class of child. And by the way, stalkers, as we discussed before, are in fact pedophiles. We find many pedophiles that are stalkers. The unfortunate problem with that is they'll follow the child, they'll write articles in their journals about and everything else. I had one that they tried to get me to go stalking on from another city, and he had written a story about in his journal about how he was going to sexually assault this young boy, but he wasn't sure how he was going to kill him. So he then, when they found all those journals and stuff, they wanted to go stalking on him, but they couldn't, even though he followed him, photographed him, wrote articles, et cetera, et cetera. Why couldn't they go stalking on him?
I don't know. I can't imagine that.
Never made contact with the child. Wow. The child never knew he was being stalked. If you don't know you're being stalked, most countries will not go stalking on you. because the person has to have that fear. That's why we have a completely new class of stalkers out there that we're running across. We call them the silent stalkers. They will stalk their victims for years, for months on the internet. They write journals, they write stuff on the internet now, and then they end up killing their victim. And the victim has no idea they've ever been stalked at all. And they have for a long period of time.
That's That's absolutely frightening.
It is. Christina Grimmie, look her up. She was a celeb. Christina Grimmie was a celebrity, and I've been asked to profile this case on numerous television shows. Was a young, up-and-coming singer. She was on The Voice. She was number 3 on The Voice, and she went to a concert in Florida, and the guy that had been stalking her for the last 6 months went to the concert. She never knew about him, didn't know anything about him. And there's a whole long litany of information about him that we researched and found out, and the other police department did. They did a great job of forensic evaluation after the case, unfortunately. And he walked up to her in that particular concert after she was done, and she'd never seen him or anything else. He walks up to her and he puts 3 rounds into her and kills her, and then kills himself. So that's just one example. I have others, but that's just one classic example. She was a wonderful, beautiful child, and this happened. I have daughters. I don't want that to happen to them.
It's atrocious. As we mentioned earlier, Detective Proctor, so these types of stalkers that say that, say they are trying to get access to kids, or they're following kids, or they're spying on kids, or they're trying to get access to their mothers and things like that. Are these typically pedophiles, or are they typically people trying to use kids to put fear in the parents that they're stalking? What have you seen with that situation?
Well, that's another. There's multiples on that question. Okay. If you read my book, and I suggest that everybody that's interested in stalking or has an issue with stalking get it, because it's easy to understand. One of the reasons that they wanted me to write a book like this, because it lays out stalking A to Z, the phenomenon and stuff, tells you how to prevent help when you're being stalked, et cetera, et cetera. It's 500 pages long. So there's a bunch of information in it. But the thing is, because they said, you're simple, so you need to write a simple book, okay, that we can understand. And most people say that. They say, wow, I really like this because I don't need a dictionary to understand it. And I don't need the psychiatry book to figure these things out. You've laid it out for me. I understand. So that's why I wrote the book that way. So the situation is that stalkers will use children to assist them in gathering information on their stalking victims. And this is usually in a domestic violence or an intimate partner relationship. And they'll have the stalker will tell their child to leave a door unlocked so I can go in and search the house when your mother's not there. Or they'll sit down and they'll grill them on everything the mother does or everything the girlfriend does in her life and that type of thing. Now, and here's another scary situation. Whenever we have an intimate partner stalking and there's young children involved, either they have the children together or they don't, she has children per se, and he's just the boyfriend, we ask the victim, has the stalker ever talked about being sexually molested during his lifetime? And you look at the victim across the way, and their eyes just tell the story, because their children have been acting out and they didn't understand why. Because when the stalker had access to the child, he was molesting them. Now, the only reason he was molesting them was because, one, he was a pedophile, or two, and it could be and or two, is the fact is that he was fantasizing about the female that he was when he was molesting her daughter, and or he wanted to get back at that female because she left him. Right? Yeah, it's sad, but these are questions we ask. So it doesn't happen every time, but it happened enough, and then we have to ship the child off to a special team that does nothing but work sexual molestation, sexual assault on children. Now, again, I told you that certain stalkers will stalk or pedophiles, so they will stalk a specific class of child. And they do stalk. Now, as far as trying to, and some of the things you explained, as far as trying to, I've never had a case where the stalker goes after the specific child in question to try and gather information on that victim if there's no previous relationship, in other words. I mean, it's not like, you know, boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, that type of thing. But that doesn't mean it can't happen, because there's all kinds of stalkers out there. I haven't worked them all, you know. In 20 years, I haven't worked them all. So you never know.
It's very, very interesting classes of people, that's for sure. Have you ever seen things like heterosexual male on male or heterosexual female on female stalking, like where the female stalker is helping her male stalker husband, or as I mentioned to you, or a vindictive? Why would that happen? That it would be like a heterosexual?
Well, the only reason in the things that you were talking about, the only reason I could see that was happening is that this woman is so brainwashed by this husband that she will do his bidding no matter what, because something's happening to her within the relationship. Either she's being assaulted sexually and or other, or whatever. So she's very subservient to that individual and will assist him no matter what, even though in the back of her mind, she probably knows it's wrong. That could transpire. But I personally haven't had anything like that. And I don't normally ever have, again, going back to the Genesis victim, I haven't run across, I've had women stalk women because they were sexually enamored by them or they want to have a relationship with them, same as men stalking men. But I've also, remember, there's all kinds of stalking, and one of the stalkers we describe in here is a revenge stalking. Now, I have had women stalk other women to get back at them because they're dating somebody that they don't want them to date, or they're with somebody they don't want to date. Same thing happens with guys. So yeah, you get that, but not for sexual advantage or anything like that. Not to regain a relationship. And a lot of stalking is what we call schism. In other words, there's a relationship and it breaks up and the schism's out, and the stalker's trying his best to try and bring that schism back to singularity or a circle. We always write it on the chalkboard and we explain it that way, but that's what we see a lot of times. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised about anything I run across, because there's so many different things that have transpired over the years. I just finished another book that talks about a lot of my unusual cases and stuff too. It's not out yet. So
what's it called? That's exciting.
I don't know yet. No, some of them are celebrity stalkers, so I kind of have to see what's going on there and other things. So yeah.
Oh, interesting. Well, good for you. This has been a great discussion, and it's gone by pretty quick, Detective. What I guess, like,
I don't want to bore you.
No. Oh my gosh, no. The time has flown. Is there anything? I'll get into your book a bit and where people can find you. But for victims of stalking, like, just to kind of wrap up, what are some things that they should be doing to really help themselves in this situation, besides getting a copy of your book?
well, yeah, too. But the thing is that we always tell all of our victims, you need to document everything that transpires. In fact, when we first started working stalkers, we used to give them a form that had a list so they could ledger all the stalking incidents and stuff, because sometimes they'll think about something that they didn't let us know about, or they'll be at home and something happens and they write it down, and so they keep a good register of it. So we used to do that all the time. You document. We're telling people now, you know what, video cameras are so cheap anymore, and they're not really hard to set up. Get yourself some video cameras set up, because stalkers are gatherers of souvenirs and intelligence. So they will break into your house if they can, and they will try and get as much information on you as they can. Now, we do have stalkers that like to break into houses and like to leave things in the house that terrorize you. So, for example, if you have a collection, a doll collection or something like that, they may do things to your dolls that are disgusting when they go in there, or they may steal your favorite doll or whatever else, but they'll do things like that. They'll leave parts of themselves when they enter your house. What do you mean by that? Well, what I mean is they'll urinate on your computer, they'll defecate in areas, they'll do all kinds of things that cause you all kinds of problems. And one of the other weird things we had when the stalker was trying to damage his estranged wife is she was an avid bicycle rider. All right, in the garage, you know, stationary bike type thing. Did she actually get on like a Peloton, but it wasn't a Peloton in those days. And he was an engineer. So what he did is he engineered the seat and so if she got on it, the seat would come off and there would be a spike underneath the seat. So you use your own idea what happened there. And fortunately, she came in and pushed up against the seat to get on it, and it came off and she found it. So she didn't get damaged there, but he sent his little kid in through the doggy door of her house. And then he went in and after he'd stolen her car, he went in and activated all the gas jets in the house and set up the switches so that when you came in and activated a switch, it would cause an explosion. And fortunately, she was able to find that before it transpired, and we were able to get, fire agents over there and bomb squad and take care of that. But yeah, so you see all that kind of stuff.
That's outrageous. That's just crazy. Really, like I had no idea. I had no idea.
Stalkers are crazy.
Oh my goodness, I had no idea to the extent of this. This has been a huge learning experience for sure.
It's just a little bit, Tegan. So.
Oh my goodness, I can't imagine. And I guess something victims should not be doing, which probably happens a lot, is having any type of communication with the stalker, asking them to stop, right?
We're very specific on that. Once we get a victim in, we make sure that they cancel all communication with the stalker. It depends on the investigator, but we don't normally tell the investigator to tell the person to change their phone numbers and things of that nature, because we tell them to get a burner phone or whatever else. They can get a cheap burner phone someplace, and they can use that to communicate with other people. But we want the stalker to remain in contact with them, and so that we can tape record all those things or get the texts and stuff, because we can get a search warrant and get all that information. But the other thing is that once you eliminate a venue that's on say your stalker is only calling you all the time and he's just getting more and more frustrated, but he's just calling you and he hasn't done more really, except for maybe go contact your friends or something like that. But the minute you shut down a line of communication with him, then he could go worse. He could go off the charts, and then that becomes worse. But when we're involved, again, not all agencies work the way we do, but when we were involved, then we made sure that didn't happen. Now you get a stranger stalker, and what do we have to do with that? She has no idea. That's extremely fearful for them, because they have no idea who's stalking them and causing all these issues and things of that nature. So we have to go back and we have to work the victim and follow her and find out what's going on. And most of the time when we do that, we can find the stalker. But that's something that's you got to know how to do that. So that's something that's unusual. Keep in mind that in the United States, only 5 to 16% of all stalking cases that are stalking are ever investigated as stalking. Because remember, it's a course of conduct crime. So they can have rude, annoying, threatening phone calls, vandalism, trespass, et cetera, so they can arrest the stalker for that and get them in the system, because a lot of investigators feel we don't have the time to do all this stuff. We've got so many other cases. They're going to get past that because they got to get the stalking going so they can really start putting some teeth behind it. Keep in mind that every stalker we ever arrested and prosecuted, we never had one, we never lost a case. They all pled guilty, except that one I was telling you about. They all pled guilty prior to trial. Now they made it go to prelim. That's where we present the facts to a judge, and he said, yeah, you can go ahead with the case or no. We oftentimes went to prelim, but we never went to trial. And most all of our stalking cases, the suspect pled out to multiple felony crimes other than the crime of stalking and did state prison time behind it. Some had never been arrested before in their entire life. I've had millionaires we've arrested and taken down. They had to do time in the joint, never been arrested. They had 4 attorneys. The attorneys came to me and they said, all right, Proctor, we can maybe go on this, we can maybe go on that. We can't go on this whole thing. And besides that, I'm getting too many, I have to call the paramedics because I'm getting too many paper cuts from all the investigation you've done. I'm cutting my hands going through your cases. So I said, too bad, you know, that's the way it goes. So we were very successful, and that's not a pat on the back, it's we're doing our job. We were very successful, and our biggest things, we helped the victim and we stopped the murders. Because we were still homicide detectives too, working all those. So that's what we did.
Amazing. That's amazing. Well, I'm so glad that you're doing what you're doing and that I was able to talk to you. And Detective Mike, what are you up to these days, and where can folks find your work? And I'm going to put a link in the description of this video to where people can go and buy your book. But what are you up to these days, and where can people
this
find
is the book. You got to go out and get it because it'll help you.
I'm going to get one.
All right. Just go to my website, which is www.detectivemikeproctor.com. There's an email on that you can contact me on if you need. Now, I'm not going to be able to help everybody, and I only get one side of the case, so I try and assist as many people as I can. Like I explained to you, there are times when law enforcement will reach out to me and I will help them, but I can't get involved in any kind of investigation unless they reach out to me, and then I help them, show them what direction I might go on in this case, what to look for, because we do search warrants on all of our stalkers, by the way. So we search their houses, their cars, their computers, and all that stuff. We do all that. And unfortunately, some of the conversation we're having right now, I'm sure you're going to have stalkers watch it. All right. That's
I'm sure.
That's one of the issues that I have. That's why the threat assessment and information I give it out to law enforcement, and our protocol is about 32 pages long, and it works every time you use it. But we don't give that out to citizens, and I don't put that in my book. So, because unfortunately, stalkers read my book. They're really good at trying to gather as much information about stalking as they can. I've had them where I go search their house and I see this paperwork and it's got California's penal code section on it. All the stuff's underlined, and in the margins, this guy's written, no, Detective Proctor wouldn't like this because it's stalking. You know, so I mean, that's and of course that guy was severe OCD and obsessive compulsive disorder. I love those guys. Did you know why? Because they write everything down. They ledger everything and they give us all this information. So, because I can't help it. So it's, you gotta know what kind of stalker you're doing. I enjoy working stalker. They're weird, but I like working them. So.
Oh, the stories you've told me are just insane, but I guess that's to be expected.
That's just a few. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, I guess we'll tie it off here. That was a fantastic discussion. I'm sure there are going to be stalkers watching this for sure, and that'll be interesting. This was great. Thank you so much. I'm going to give you a proper goodbye after we stop recording, but thank you, Detective.
Okay, no problem. I hope I helped somebody out there.
Oh, I'm sure you have, in many different ways. Thank you so much for your time today. This was awesome.
Okay, fine. God bless and enjoy. Yeah.